The shores of two worlds, in a small coastal village nestled between emerald hills and a restless sea. The sun rose every morning like a promise. The air carried the scent of salt and freedom, and the waves whispered stories that only the patient could understand. Life here moved slowly like the tide, rising, falling, yet always steady. And among the people who called this place home was a humble fisherman named Mateo. Every morning before dawn, Mateo would push his small wooden boat into the ocean. The planks creaked beneath his feet, and the oars dipped silently into the water. He didn't rush. He didn't chase. He simply moved with the rhythm of the sea. The world was still asleep while he cast his nets, his hands guided by instinct, his heart calm with gratitude. By noon, he would return with just enough fish to feed his family and sell a few at the village market. His face, weathered by years under the sun, carried a quiet satisfaction, a peace that few noticed and even fewer understood. After selling his catch, he would walk home through narrow streets where children played and old men told stories. He'd stop to greet them all, his laughter carried by the wind. In the afternoons, he would rest under a palm tree by the shore, his wife preparing lunch while his two daughters built castles in the sand. The sea, glistening under the sun, felt like an old friend watching over them. Sometimes Mateo would close his eyes and think about nothing at all. He needed no reminder that life as it was already complete. But far beyond that quiet village, across cities filled with glass towers and endless noise, another man lived a very different kind of life. His name was Daniel Hartman, a man who had climbed every mountain success had to offer. He was the founder and CEO of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm, a name that echoed in boardrooms, magazines, and conference halls. To the world, Daniel was the definition of success. Every morning his day began not with sunrise, but with schedules, meetings, and numbers. His phone buzzed before he could taste his coffee, and his thoughts raced before his feet hit the floor. The world admired his drive, his focus, his relentless pursuit of more. Yet beneath the tailored suits and expensive watches, Daniel carried something no one saw, an emptiness that wealth could not fill. He had everything, yet he felt nothing. Every milestone reached was followed by another goal, another deal, another mountain to climb. He had learned to conquer, but he had forgotten to feel. Nights were the hardest. When the city lights flickered through his window, he would sit alone, staring at his reflection in the glass. The man looking back at him seemed powerful but tired, successful but lost. One morning, after a particularly stressful quarter and endless negotiations, Daniel's doctor gave him news he could no longer ignore. Exhaustion, burnout, dangerously high blood pressure. His body was failing under the weight of his own ambition. For the first time in years, he was told to stop, to take a break, to breathe. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. He chose a place far from his world, a coastal village someone had mentioned in passing, known for its calm waters and slow pace of life. He booked a week's stay, telling himself he would rest. Just a week, he thought. Then he would return to his empire stronger than before. When Daniel arrived, the difference was almost painful. The air was pure, untouched by smoke or stress. The people moved with ease, their smiles unforced. Time itself seemed slower here, as if the world had forgotten the need to rush. At first, Daniel couldn't adjust. His hands kept reaching for his phone. His mind kept wandering back to his office. But the ocean had a way of silencing even the loudest thoughts. Every morning from the balcony of his small seaside cottage, he would watch the fishermen push their boats into the waves. They worked with grace, without hurry, without noise. One fisherman in particular caught his attention, a man with steady hands and eyes that carried peace. He watched as the man returned each day by noon, smiling, laughing with others, living as if he had already won something Daniel didn't understand. One afternoon, while sitting by the cafe overlooking the shore, Daniel noticed the same fisherman resting under a tree, eyes closed, content in stillness. Something about that calm unsettled him. It felt alien, almost uncomfortable. He had spent his life building empires, chasing results, proving his worth. And yet, here was someone who seemed to need nothing, yet had everything Daniel didn't. He watched the man day after day. No rush, no ambition, no anxiety, just presence, just peace. For the first time, Daniel began to question the rhythm of his own life. Was it possible that this fisherman, with his simple boat and quiet joy, was richer than him in ways money could never measure? The thought haunted him. It followed him back to his cottage each night, echoing louder than the waves. He thought about the deals he'd made, the people he'd lost, the years that had vanished in pursuit of something that never seemed enough. He had climbed to the top of the world only to discover the view was lonely. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn. The sky was still dark and the village silent. For reasons he couldn't explain, he walked down to the shore. The air was cool, the stars fading as the first light touched the horizon. And there, once again, he saw the fisherman pushing his boat into the sea. Daniel watched him disappear into the mist, the sound of the waves swallowing everything else. Something stirred inside him. Not envy, not admiration, but a quiet longing. A feeling he hadn't known since childhood. The longing for stillness, for peace, for meaning. And as he stood there, alone on that empty shore, Daniel realized he was standing at the edge of two worlds. One he had built, and one he had forgotten how to live in. The sea shimmered with gold as the sun rose higher, and somewhere in the distance the fisherman's boat bobbed gently with the tide. Daniel's week of rest had just begun, but deep within him something much greater was awakening, a question that would not let him go, a question that would change the course of his life forever. The price of more. The days in the coastal village passed slower than Daniel had ever known time could move. Each sunrise seemed to stretch longer, as if the universe itself was asking him to pause. The gentle rhythm of waves and wind had a way of dissolving the noise that used to fill his mind. Yet even as his body rested, his thoughts wrestled with something he could not quite name. Every morning he found himself at the same spot on the beach, watching the fisherman, Mateo, set out to sea. It became a ritual, though Daniel didn't fully understand why. He watched how Mateo's movements blended with the water, how he smiled even when the catch was small, how he returned before noon no matter how plentiful or empty his nets were. There was a pattern to the man's life, a peace that came not from having more but from wanting less. And for Daniel, that was the strangest truth of all. He tried to distract himself. He checked his phone, though the signal was weak. He opened his laptop, though the emails felt meaningless now. The world he had built was still calling for him. Investors, meetings, deals, but for the first time he hesitated to answer. Each notification felt heavier than before, like a reminder of a life that demanded everything but gave nothing back. At night, as the waves whispered against the shore, Daniel would sit alone on the sand. The stars above seemed infinite, unmeasured by ambition or success. He thought about how far he had come, from a small apartment with dreams bigger than his wallet, to skyscrapers bearing his name. He had conquered everything he once believed mattered. Yet sitting under that vast, indifferent sky, he felt smaller than ever. He remembered the people who had once been part of his journey, his friends, his parents, even the woman he once loved. One by one they had drifted away, unable to keep pace with the storm of his ambition. He had always told himself it was worth it, that someday when the work was done he would rest, but that day never came. And now, as the sea murmured softly in the dark, Daniel realized something painful. He hadn't built success. He had built a cage. A golden one, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. The next morning, curiosity led him closer to the docks. He watched as the fishermen hauled in their nets, laughing and shouting, their faces alive with sun and salt. Mateo was among them, moving with quiet strength, his smile as constant as the tide. Daniel stood there, observing a kind of wealth that money could never buy. The wealth of simplicity, of connection, of enough. The other fishermen noticed Daniel's suit, his expensive watch, his polished shoes sinking into the sand. They nodded politely, but their eyes held no envy, no awe. It struck Daniel deeply. He was a man who commanded rooms filled with the world's most powerful people. Yet here, among those who owned almost nothing, his status meant nothing at all. Later that day, as he walked through the village market, Daniel saw Mateo again, talking with neighbors, helping an elderly woman carry her basket, laughing with a group of children who followed him like shadows. His presence seemed to lift everyone around him. Daniel paused, realizing that true leadership wasn't about commanding respect through fear or wealth. It was about inspiring peace through presence. Mateo didn't build empires. He built moments. And perhaps in the end that was the greater legacy. That evening, Daniel wandered down to the beach again, his thoughts heavy. He had spent a lifetime believing that more was the answer. more success, more power, more recognition. But as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the world in gold and crimson, he felt the quiet truth sink in. The pursuit of more was endless. It could never be satisfied because it was built on the fear of not being enough. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had built companies, closed deals, written contracts worth millions. Yet they trembled now, empty and unsure. All his life he had worked to control everything around him, but he had never learned to simply exist within it. For the first time, Daniel began to see how much he had traded away for the illusion of success. He had traded peace for productivity, connection for control, joy for justifications. He had chased numbers and titles, forgetting that life itself was never meant to be a competition. It was meant to be lived. As he stood at the edge of the water, the waves touched his feet, cool and cleansing. A strange sense of surrender washed over him, not defeat but release. The realization that he didn't have to keep running anymore. Still, part of him resisted. Decades of conditioning, of ambition, of pride, none of it disappeared overnight. He was a man used to action, not reflection. He couldn't just let go of everything he had built. Not yet. But something inside him had shifted. He no longer saw success as he once did. He began to wonder what it would mean to start again. Not to build higher, but to live deeper. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself walking through the village more often. He helped where he could, not for recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction it brought. He shared meals with the locals, listened to their stories, and discovered a kind of joy that came not from achievement, but from belonging. He began to sleep better, breathe easier, smile more. The tension that had once lived in his chest started to fade. Each day, he watched the fisherman return with his modest catch, and each day, Daniel understood a little more about what success might truly mean. But then came the day he had been dreading, the last morning of his stay. His car waited by the dirt road, ready to take him back to the airport, back to his world of skyscrapers and screens. He packed his bags, but his heart felt heavy. The thought of returning to that life, the endless meetings, the constant pressure, the noise made him uneasy. For the first time, he questioned whether he belonged there anymore. Standing by the window, watching the waves, Daniel realized that the village hadn't just shown him peace. It had shown him truth. A truth he could no longer ignore. As the driver called out that it was time to leave, Daniel hesitated. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, where Mateo's small boat was gliding back to shore. Golden in the morning light, and at that moment, Daniel knew something was ending, and something else was just beginning. He took one last look at the sea, breathed in deeply, and whispered a promise to himself. To return, to remember, to redefine what success truly meant. Because somewhere between the silence of the waves and the laughter of a simple fisherman, Daniel had caught something far more valuable than any deal he'd ever made. He had caught a glimpse of himself, the man he had forgotten to be.